this is where anger is. This is where depression is, because you're responsible. And I said sorry to my 15-year-old me. And I told the 15-year-old me, everything you went through was not in vain. Life is great. And there are many great things that came from that. And the 15-year-old me came back to me and said, "I know, I love you and I'm proud of you." Would I have been able to sit there and go, "I love you and I'm really proud of you as my father"? No, because that anger, that pain, that energy is held in your body somewhere. So if my dad was here right now, I'd say, "I don't condone anything you did. You hurt my mum. But right now..."
Harry, thank you so much for honouring me with this opportunity to sit with you today. A few months ago, we had a quick Zoom call, and the amount of knowledge I consumed in that 15 minutes of speaking to you, I think was just incredible. And when the idea of Unscripted came up, I thought, Harry is someone I have to sit down with and have a conversation, because your journey of pain to purpose is incredible. So for our listeners and viewers, please tell me a bit about yourself.
Sure, it's an honour to be here. Where do you start? Especially if we're talking about pain to purpose. I experienced what others would call a lot of pain as a child. My own journey is more about experiencing domestic violence. So grew up with a father who was alcoholic, which was one thing on its own. Growing up with a father who physically attacked my mum several times a week. So we hear about domestic violence from the perspective of maybe the woman who's being domestically, having domestic abuse, or even the men, we know that now. But mine was from the perspective of the child that saw what was going on. So even experiencing physical abuse myself from my father, I didn't even think of myself being physically abused, because it seemed negligent compared to what I was seeing my mother go through. So, yeah, my journey went from my first memory is at 3 years old of my mum having her earring ripped out of her ear by my father. And I still recall it to this day. I mean, even being as a speaker now, and I talk about what happened, I can talk in a way where the suffering's not there, but the pain will always be there. But I remember my auntie was sort of like nursing my mum better. And my mum's standing there with blood trickling down her arm. And my auntie said to me, "It's okay, Beta." And I remember at 3 years old thinking, that's not okay.
It's not okay.
It's not okay. And I went on a journey of like, I don't like this guy, who's my father. I don't like this guy. And then it escalated to, I hate him. I have so many recollections of moments that when you look back now and go, well, they were horrific in terms of not just what he did to me or to my mum. And so all the way through, and I'm rushing it here because we're in a limited time space, but it's right up to 15 years old. I left home, and I've always called that was my worst day of my life, irrespective of all the things I experienced. And the reason it was the worst day of my life was one evening I had an altercation with my father. And when I say altercation, I call it altercation, not to minimize what it was, but it was an incident where my father was attacking my mum. And at 15 years old, I was a little bit bigger now. And my strategy would be to just intervene, get in between them, and, let my father hit me rather than my mum. Yeah. But this was different because I think my elbow had hit my father and he fell on the floor and he'd be cursing at me. And what used to happen after that was it would simmer down and everybody pretend like nothing happened. But I lived a life where when my father was in that phase of being violent, because he went from like sick, he'd be sick when he's withdrawing from alcohol, to sober for a little bit, then get tipsy. When he was tipsy, then he was angry, and then he would escalate to what I call pissed, meaning I could get away with murder, basically. Yeah. But when he's in the tipsy phase and he was violent, I would stay out. And what I meant by stay out, I'd sleep on the streets in central London. I didn't sleep, I'd hang out overnight from the age of 11, 12, 13. That's what I was doing. That was my strategy.
So your childhood pretty much was just hanging out.
Well, what it was, I didn't want to be at home.
Yeah.
Homes represented pain, which was, there's a paradox there because home was also the most beautiful thing because I love my mum.
Yeah.
And so for me, on this night when I was 15, my strategy was like about 9 o'clock, I'm just going to sneak out, catch a bus and from East London and get to central London and hang out in Leicester Square and do what I did, which was basically help the other homeless people, right? But it didn't work out that way because at 9, I planned to get up and like sneak out, but I'd fallen asleep in my clothes. And my uncle came into my room. Now, my uncle lived with us, who's my dad's younger brother, my dad's younger, stronger brother. And I woke up with him on top of me, where his hands and nails were to my throat, trying to kill me. And it was all a blur, but I remember that, I'm trying to get him off, I'm trying to scream, I'm trying to do all these things. And my mum came into the room. I remember opening the door, and my mum's only 5'1", right? But she looked like a giant. She came in the room and grabbed my uncle, who's 6 foot tall, literally threw him off me and shouted at him in English, which she could speak English well when she chose to. Don't you ever touch my son again. And she looked at me and said, go to sleep. And I was like, because I've never seen my mum like that. My mum, the most gentle person you've ever seen. But fast forward, I didn't go to sleep, but I didn't really open my eyes. And I woke up, my mum was still sitting there. I don't know if she'd been there all the way through. And she said to me, come on, get up, you've got to go. And I thought she meant go to school. And in my head, I was like, I'm not going to school today. And I went downstairs and she packed my bags. And she had called my auntie because a few months before, I'd made that mistake of going to social services and asking what would happen if my friend was in this situation. But they sussed out it was me. And we had a little meeting at school where my head teacher was there, my mum was there, to my horror. And they said, they tell me that the first point of call for a kid isn't to put you in a kid's home. It's like live with someone in your family. And they'd had my aunt there and asking her if she would take me in. So on this morning, my mum had packed my bags and said my aunt was waiting for me outside. I thought, how could I leave my mum? Because social services thinking I'm at risk, right? But it wasn't me at risk in my eyes. And I went towards my mum and she screamed, go. And I literally picked up my bags and got in the car and we went off to where my aunt lived, about an hour away. And that was, for me, the worst day of my life, not because of, when I finally shared what happened to me, even wrote a book about it, I labelled that as one of my worst days of my life because I now felt homeless because I wasn't living at home. And my son, when he was 6, read my book and said, but Daddy wasn't homeless. I said, no, you're right. But to me, I was. And everything from there went from, I hate this guy, till now, public enemy number one. I needed somebody to blame for me to be taken away from my mum. But even though I say that, I want you to be clear and I want your viewers to be clear. I say it was my worst day. And I did manage to turn my life around. And it wasn't until I was about 25, right? So I had 10 years of being probably the most angriest kid on the planet. But my story is a gift for me. It's a blessing where I could have got very destructive and I could have also got very constructive. And the truth is I did both, right? I would snap at anybody that mentioned anything about my mum or any of my situation. I was just ready. But I just felt I'd always been guided. I'd always been guided to help other people. Even when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I'd shut the door of my house and go, that's pain. I'd go to school to suck out every ounce of the day. And I'd go to school like it was a big party. If I saw other kids at school who were feeling miserable, I'd be their friend. And I didn't want to ask them what was happening. No one knew. No one knew what was happening in my home. No one, because I was probably one of the most happiest kids at school. right? So to me, the journey began with all of this stuff happening at home and me holding it in and trying to live this double life. None of my friends ever came to my house. They dropped me off, I'd go in. So that's how it started. But, you know, when you're talking pain to purpose, I'm so grateful that I was guided at an early age. That I always believed serving and helping other people it actually saved my life. It's what I get to do now. It's what I love to do. But it did actually save my life because I was more focused on helping other people. As a kid, I always had beliefs like I've got it better than other people. But yeah, we can go into what I did at 15, 16, which launched everything that I do right now as well.
I'm amazed, Harry, at so many things that you've said. They're shocked. What strikes me the most, I think, is the fact that despite all of this going on, you were always just thinking about what is it that you can do to get things to be better. You know, going helping those homeless people. You said, you know, you'd go out at that age and you'd be helping other homeless people, going to school and you're helping others. You were constantly doing something. And I think that was fueling some of your positivity, wasn't it?
I don't think I was doing it. I don't think I was doing it constantly. When I would find it, I knew the out of hours social services telephone number at 12 years old, but that was for me in case I got kicked out of my house, right? And I had information that I needed for me, but something was guiding me that, like, I had friends who were girls who were being put into refuges, women's refuges. That men are not supposed to know these places and where they exist. And I did, and I was helping them because I had this information and data. When I was hanging out in Leicester Square at 11 o'clock till 4 or 5 o'clock until the night bus can bring me back to East London, I was like, what do you do when you're there? Like, when I was young, like 30 odd years ago, it was like London used to finish by 1 p.m. Everybody would come out of the nightclub. So by 2 a.m., 3 a.m., everybody gone home. It was only the cleaners. And then the cleaners leave by about 3 a.m. And then it was just me and the homeless dudes. And I was that kid that would go to McDonald's and Burger King with my hands behind my back where I'd had bags full of food and just go and hand out to the homeless people. I wasn't doing it because I thought, I'm consciously helping other people. It was just, I don't know. I always say I was guided, but at the same time, when I did it consciously, truth be told, when I was helping other people, I helped other people because I needed to. It gave me a sense of, it gave me something that I felt good about. But it wasn't until I turned my own life around, I started helping people because I wanted to. And that's when it compounded.
Yeah. I mean, so at 15, you left home. What happened then?
Amazing. I grew up in Newham in East London, right where the Olympics were. And my auntie lived about a 40-minute bus drive away in North Woolwich. And I'd catch a bus to school. Now I felt there was something wrong because now I'm catching a bus from school, coming from somewhere where I'm not living. So kids knew what was going on. Teachers knew what was going on. And I got assigned a social worker. Now, that was my biggest thing. I got assigned a social worker. That's like, you know, you being assigned a shrink. There must be something wrong with you, right? And I really didn't like my social worker. Not because she was horrible. It was what she represented. And back then, they would come and have a meeting, check in with me every couple of weeks. And I used to say to her, look, I'm fine. Why do you need to come and see me? Like, you go and have some food, and she'd take me to McDonald's. I don't even know if that was what you were supposed to do back then, but she would just take me to a cafe and want to know how I am or something. And I was like, why don't you just give me the money? I'll go for food and tell everybody I'm okay. I said, I'm fine until you come and see me. And then I said, what do you do?
But were you fine though?
Pardon?
Were you fine, even though you were saying I'm fine?
No. I mean, I was the angry kid. All I wanted to do was go home. Every day I went to school, Monday to Friday. During lunchtime, I'd eat my lunch and run the 100 yards where my mum was living. And I'd go and see my mum at lunchtime and scowl at my father, right? Because I felt like I had no control. Someone had taken me out. I was literally going to school, going to the youth centre, because if any time I wasn't at home, I wanted to be doing something rather than be at my aunt's house, because being at my aunt's house, even though I loved my aunt and my cousins, it was great, but it represented me not being home. So when this social worker, I said, what do you actually do other than annoy kids? And I wasn't being horrible to her, but I was just like, I didn't understand I wasn't in a position to communicate to her that you represent something I don't want, right? And then she's like, I visit children's homes. I said, you do what? Because you know what? Since about 11 or 12, my father would threaten to put me in a children's home. And I'd be like, wow, let's do it, right? Like, I was watching Home and Away and Neighbours. That they used to watch those soaps where kids were in a home. And I thought, it's going to be a holiday camp for me. Send me to a children's home, it'd be a holiday camp. So I said to this social worker, can I come with you? And I was so stubborn. I said, I don't want to meet you at a list. Like, I'll come with you. She already thought I was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
So I visited a children's home with my social worker. And she sat me down in a sort of kitchen dining area. And I remember it's like a wooden table. And there's a bunch of young people there. None of them, and she went off to speak to the care manager of the home. Left me there with a bunch of kids. And some of them were older than me, right? And I remember this was 1 week before my 16th birthday. And she sat me there and I'm asking the kids, like, do you have your own room? And they're like, kissing their teeth, just looking the other way. And I was like, oh, must have issues, right? And then I asked the girl, like, do you have your friends coming around? And she just turned around. And I went to ask someone else something. And the bigger guy out of the group got up, he kicked his chair down. And he's sort of like, I don't want to use profanity, but he was using it. But he told me, like, I remember the words where he said, like, shut up. You're one of the lucky ones. Now, even though he was bigger than me, I had my growth spurt around 15, so I was a little bit smaller than him, but then I got bigger. But when he said, you're one of the lucky ones, I was already tensed, ready to, like, fight him. We're from East London, right? But as soon as he said, you're one of the lucky ones, because he was approaching me aggressively, as soon as he said, you're one of the lucky ones, I looked at him and I thought, you don't know anything about me. And he saw it. He saw my face change. And then he started to tell me stories about the young people that were next to him. The girl that I was speaking to, he pulled up her wrist, she got cuts on her arms for every day that she's there. The kid that was asking, like, if he got his own room, runs away from this home every Friday. None of them were from London. They were taken from different parts of the UK, brought to London. He'd run away on a Friday night to go meet his girlfriend in Manchester somewhere, and the police would bring him back. I sat down and I just listened to each and every one of them. And I think that was the first time I thought, maybe I'm one of the lucky ones, right? And an hour passed. And I know it was an hour because my social worker came and said, it's time to go. And I'm like, you know, like man hugging the guy, the fist thing, put it around, giving the girls a hug. They go, when you coming back? I'm like, 2 weeks' time, because she comes and sees me 2 weeks. And a week later, it's my 16th birthday. And I'm hanging out in the youth centre. Because, like, it's your 16th birthday. You want to be home. You want to be with your mum. So I thought, I'll hang out at my youth centre because it was a safe place for me. When I say safe, you'll hear later that maybe it wasn't, but it was where I'd hang out and I'd be busy. I'd be helping out. And my youth worker, Martin, he came up to me and he said, hey, Harry, listen, I need to speak to you. Back then, and even probably to this day, when someone says I need to speak to you, my first instinct is I'm in trouble, right? So I'm like, Martin, am I in trouble? He said, no. And he pointed to his office, which was a glass window, and my social worker was sitting in there. And I looked at him and he goes, did you visit a children's home? I said, it was her fault, it was her idea. And he was like, I said, Martin, am I in trouble? He said, no, Harry. He said, the care manager has contacted the social worker and asked her when her colleague is coming back to deliver his next anger management workshop. My response to Martin was, am I in trouble? He said, no, Harry, they want to pay you. I was like, let's go. And he's like, what did you do? I said, I don't know. He goes, what are you going to do? I said, my anger management workshop, of course. And I was like, did you say they're going to pay me? He's like, I thought when he said they're going to pay me, I thought I'm going to buy a house, get my mum out. I was thinking all of this stuff, right? And he's like, you're 16 years old today. He goes, they're not going to, he goes, look, here's what I do. Here's what we can do. With social services, we'll give youth service something, and then they'll give me expenses. I was like, whatever, let's go. 1 week after this is why I always say to people, I had my first professional gig as a speaker, as a facilitator, 16 years old, because I was now back in this kid's home. Petrified, because now I'm supposed to do an anger management workshop. I have no idea. But I learned shortly later, what was it I did? And I went back and I listened to these guys. And when people say, what do you do to really make a difference in working with young people? I said, I listened and I believed in them. I didn't say I believed everything they say, because they exaggerate a bit, but I listened and I believed in them. And that was my guiding principle as like working with young people. But I went back that time, and this young people were there, but there was more of them. And they were like ready for me. And here's the crazy thing. They thought I was a youth worker. They didn't realize I was a kid coming with a social worker, and they all thought I was older than them. And they're like, yeah, I'll speak to this kid. And I would just say whatever came out of my mouth and rely on just listening. And people were like, what are you doing with these people? They're transforming their lives. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I realized, okay, it gave me a sense of purpose. So I started to train kids in child protection. That's what it was called back then, because I was helping young people and I was getting paid, even though they're expenses, right? And then there's only so much McDonald's you can buy with expenses. And suddenly youth service had a load of money for me, and they sent me on training. They were like, I'm going to send you on a training course. I was like, what's that? And they gave me a list. It was like a counseling course. I was like, yeah, I can actually learn how to help them and have something that I can use. And my journey went from going on a counseling course with mainly white women in their 40s, 50s, and a couple of white men who looked like Gandalf. And there was a brown kid, 16 years old, in Oxford on a residential course studying counselling. Loved every minute of it. Not the first 30 minutes, because I was like, what am I doing here? Loved every minute of it. But they told me they couldn't accredit me, they couldn't qualify me until I was like 21. So I did the same counselling course for 5 years and studied a different approach on therapy. And by the time I was 21, I was actually the chair of the mental health service providers in Newham. I was setting up projects for young people on the doorstep where I grew up. But I still hadn't taken care of myself, Amit. So when you say like paying into purpose, I was creating services and projects. I was instrumental in setting up the first drugs project in the UK, the biggest one ever funded by the government, right here in the Midlands, in Birmingham, in my 20s. £750,000 contract. I was running projects left, right and centre, creating things. I hadn't really taken care of my own stuff. And then after a while, it was like, people like, who is this guy? What's he doing? And so on. And I got to meet people like Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, all of these people through the work I was doing. And I was never starstruck by anybody. I'll be like, yeah, whatever you're doing, I want to learn it. I'm going to go and take it to young people and start, applying it. And it wasn't until I realized I needed to do work on my own, because I was helping other people. And I was like, maybe I need to become a client. And then in my early 20s, I managed to look at all the strategies I had, and then I put it all together into my own system of how would I help a kid that went through what I went through, but also who's held on to it for so long. And then I wrote this process down, and I called it the LIGHT process, LIGHT. And even when I wrote the book, I wanted the book to be called, what the fuck's going on, right? It was like, the publisher's telling me you can't, but I wanted it. And eventually it was called WTF's Going On. One Child Journey Through Domestic Violence, How to Turn Your Worst Day into Best Days. But in the beginning of it, I actually wrote, if someone had come to me at 18 years old and said, look, here's a book, it will show you how to turn your worst days into best days, I would have either cursed them at the best, and the worst, I probably would have beaten them up. Like, who the hell are you to tell me? You don't know me. You think this book is going to transform my life just like that? And that was when I realized that for people to actually make change, there was something that was missing that I needed before I could go a process of transforming my worst day into my best day, my pain into purpose and so on. And there's a step in my process where I actually say, you have to link the worst things that happened to you to the greatest things in your life. But in my early 20s, I couldn't actually, I went on an exercise. It was Tony Robbins. I'm in the middle of a room with 10,000 people. And I thought he said, think of the things, he actually said, close your eyes and think of the things that you're grateful for. I misheard it because I'm the kid that's writing down everything he's saying because I'm going to teach people what he's doing. And someone had interrupted me, told me to close their eyes and do the exercise. And I thought he said, think of the things that are great in your life. I closed my eyes, Amit. I couldn't think of anything great. I spent my life being busy helping other people. I'd go to sleep well. I'd go to sleep, my head would hit the pillow. I'd done so much good helping other people. I'd wake up and go again. But now I'm standing there with my eyes closed, with music playing. I'm trying to think of something great in my life, and all I can think of is terrible things that my dad did to me and my mum. And I remember an American guy comes up to me and goes, okay, buddy. I'm like, it's not okay. And I committed that during that break that he gave us, I got a blank page. I needed to write what was great in my life. And I was like, I'm alive. I was writing things like that. Then my writing was getting bigger so I could actually get back in the room. But I realized that until I could see something that was great in my life, I couldn't use the system that I'd created that was helping other people with. And I realized I was helping people that were probably the most dysfunctional or challenged in the UK. But I was like, I have to sit in that bracket. But I had sort of like separated from it. And until I addressed it and said, look, these are the things, that was when I could transform my life. That's when it really started to shift.
What would you say then to a 21-year-old, 22-year-old listening right now who is holding on to that sort of trauma and is every day pretending to get on with it? What would you say to that? I'm like,
because I'm now like 36 years later, still processing, still healing my own stuff, but helping other people. I coined the phrase, like my model, light, L-I-G-H-T, L, the first one, is let it out. And what I mean by let it out is when stuff happens to us, we have a tendency to just keep it in. And especially if someone's done something to us or we believe it's done to us, telling other people would be painful because there's a lot of stakeholders involved, right? And then I coined this phrase, emotional constipation. And I would say to people, when you hold on to shit, it's called emotional constipation. And we can numb ourselves. Some people will numb it through drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. But the numbing thing of holding on is if you hold on to something, and this is like a physical representation of it. If you hold on to this pain, I mean, if I hold on like this for an hour, this hand is going to go numb. But you know what? Numb is not as bad as the pain. So now I'll just carry on with my life like it's not really there. But it is there. And this is what drains your energy, because holding on to that actually takes more energy than it does to express. However, the challenge is to express, we associate with pain. So me telling somebody was painful. I couldn't just go to a social and go, look, all this stuff's happening to my mum, because I don't know what they're going to do. And what will my family say? And what will everybody else say? And so on. But I realized later on that through the gift of the people that I was around and, you know, expressing yourself didn't actually mean let's go and tell a social worker or a teacher or someone. You could express your emotion. And I found it through football. Like I'd be like, you know, you'd have raw energy of joy. But then it was like, you know, East London boxing gyms where you could let out the anger. But some people can let out anger through art, through dance, through writing. And now we've moved on the years. You can let out energy through breath work and all these amazing things that are available. So anybody that's at that point that thinks, you know what, I've held on to stuff and I know things have happened. And I've managed to get through life and survive in spite of it. You all know you're taking one step forward and sometimes two steps back, right? There's always something holding on to you. The first thing I would say to me is release that energy. Release the things that you haven't said that need to be said, and say it out loud while no one's there, or express the emotion. Because that anger, that pain, that energy is held in your body somewhere. So the first thing you've got to do is let it out. But if you're like me and you're like, because you get through, like L was let it out, I was initial meanings. Meaning, why did I call it my worst day? Your worst day is your worst day. My worst day is my worst day. All the amazing people you interview on this program have all had their worst days. They're not just one of them, right? But we labeled them as our worst days. Remember, I gave you one of the reasons I labeled my worst day when I was 15. Why wasn't it when my dad burst a balloon that Father Christmas gave me, which I thought was my worst day? Why wasn't that my worst day? Well, I labeled it because I felt I was homeless. And then I realized that the I in initial meanings is we give these meanings based on what we thought was happening. So first, you've got to let out the emotion. Second is the initial meanings. Why did you label that your worst day? And maybe you was a child, or maybe you was younger or less wiser. The meaning you gave to it is one thing. Because G, the next bit, greater meanings. Because I learned through personal development, I get to choose the meaning. No matter what happened to me, I get to choose the meaning. When I realized that, I put it into practice, go, you mean I can choose why my father did what he did? I only had a few questions in my life that all encapsulated with one main question. What the fuck's going on, right? But I used to go, why did my father do what he did? And more important, why did my mum respond the way she did when I helped her? That I couldn't fathom that. I would help my mum and my mum would be the one that tells me off. Couldn't understand it. And then the third one was, why did this all happen to me? And then I was like, when I'm training as a therapist, you get therapy. So I'll take my issues to the therapist. I tried so many different things. And then I was like, hang on, I can choose the meaning. So I wrote down, first question, why did my dad do what he did? And my brain's like, he was an alcoholic. I was like, no, just choose. And I wrote down, my dad did what he did so I would find out why people do what they do and help other people. I thought, I like that. Put it down. Why did my mum do what she did? I struggled with that. I struggled. I couldn't work it out. My brain's like, just choose something. So I was like, oh, my mum did it so she could teach me unconditional love. And it's part of my brain going, bullshit. I like it. And then the third one, why did it happen to me? And that was it. Everything that happened to me happened so I could find out what the fuck's going on and go and share that with other young people who are experiencing what I'm experiencing. In that moment, my life changed. Because it went from shit happened to me to it happened for me. And then when I realized I could help other people and all of the people you're interviewing and everything that you're doing, stuff happened to you, Amit. And that's when we're in victim mode. Wow. Then we get into the personal development world where it tells you, I am responsible. And that's called it happened by me. But this is a bad place to be for many people because now you're in the personal development world where I'm responsible. Here's where I am. Here's where I want to be. And now I feel like shit because I'm not there. And this is where depression happens. This is where anger is. This is where depression is because you're responsible. But Amit, when you get to a place where you say, all this happened for me, first thing happens, you don't have to fix anything. You go, well, what is the gift? And that's what G stood for, the greater meaning. What's the gift? All the blaming I was putting to my father or to alcohol, I met a girl that I loved dearly who became my wife. I've got kids that I'm just blessed to serve these kids. Well, if everything that happened to me is what I blame for all the terrible things in my life, then it also has to be for the good things. So the G was the great, but that was the trigger for me. I needed to have greatness in my life that I could link to the worst day. I would never have met the girl that is now my wife had I not left home at 15. I would never have created youth programs and youth leadership programs for millions of kids around the world. I would never have set up women's programs for women who are fleeing from domestic violence all over the world had I not left home at 15. I would never have become a professional speaker. And I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you had I not left home at the age of 15. I would never give up that day. So that's how I turned my worst day into my best day. But then I realized sometimes intellectually we can do it. But the H was I called honor myself, because I spent loads of work forgiving my father. But I'd feel bitter every time my father died when I was 18, Amit. I went home that night. Did it change? No. Nothing changed for me until I got into my early 20s. And here I was doing just stout works. Put your father in a chair, have a conversation. And I'd play full out. And I'd say that. And then they'd say, ask your father for forgiveness. And my father forgive me. And go, how do you feel afterwards? I felt like shit, to be honest, because I'm talking about what he did to me. And I'd suppressed that for a long time. But the H was when I sat down on my own with an empty chair. And it wasn't my father I was having a conversation with. It was my 15-year-old me. And I said sorry to my 15-year-old me. And I told the 15-year-old me, everything you went through was not in vain. Life is great. And there are many great things that came from that. And the 15-year-old me came back to me and said, I know, I love you and I'm proud of you. That's when I changed. And then the last part in the model was T was, I don't want to survive, I want to thrive. And that's where you are and all the guests that you've got. You can survive through all the shit that's happened to you. But when you get to that, it happened for me, through me to help other people. That's when you start to thrive and you get to the place where this is me. Everything that happened, I don't have to do shit at it. I just have to be grateful for everything that happened to you. People say to me, Harry, how do you still have so much love in your heart after everything that happened to you? I'm like, I have it because of what happened to me. And it's freeing. It is absolutely freeing. So that's a long way of answering what I would say to that person. But for them to even go down this process of what I created, I would have to remind them that if you are blaming all the terrible things in your life based on what happened then, you have to look for the great things in your life and associate the blame to that. But if you don't have anything great in your life, let's sit down and I'll freak you out and show you there is greatness in your life, right? Because we live in a world where most people think there's nothing great. But they just can't see it.
Yeah.
They just can't see it.
Do you cry sometimes, Harry?
I cry often. I got no shame in crying. I cry happy tears. I cry sad tears. But the first decade of my life was all about pushing, fix this, help people. Second one was like, now I can help people based on experience. Well, I never tell anyone what to do.
Sometimes we're just too busy to cry, aren't we? We're just so consumed in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And our purpose and our mission.
Yeah. Crying is a release.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things for me now is everything that happened for me. There'll be pain when I think about the things that happen, and that's natural. Yeah. But there's no suffering. Yeah. So the last decade of my life is all more from a spiritual standpoint, where to not put too much judgment on things, or what happened to me, or what other people do, and so on. Crying is all good. I'm very in touch with my emotions and feeling it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important to cry sometimes, just to let those emotions out. You said you lost your father when you were 18. If he was still here, is there something you'd say to him now?
Yeah. If you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have consciously and, authentically had said, thank you for everything that happened because it's allowed me to be where I am. However, would I have been able to sit there and go, I love you and I'm really proud of you as my father? No. But if you ask me today in 2025, I've done a lot of work and there's still a lot more work for me to do. I learned to love my father. I spoke with my mum. I did not want to know anything about my father. I didn't want to know anything. He was a community leader helping other people. Very similar to me, but I never wanted to be a community leader. You know how it is in the Asian family? Oh, one day, young man, you'll be a community leader. I thought, fuck that, I don't want that. Because I'm looking at community leaders and I don't want anything like them. Right? And after a while, I realized to really heal myself on a generational level, I have to realize my dad was in trauma himself. And that's not to justify what he did, but he just didn't have a way of showing how he could love me. Yeah. But I also put the judgment on him and blamed him. So if my dad was here right now, I'd say, I don't condone anything you did. You hurt my mum. But right now, I love you. I do love you. I don't love what you did. And to me, it's like I can now accept the gifts and love that he could have given me, but I can receive it spiritually and energetically. And that heals me and heals generations before me and after me.
Harry, I think you are an incredible story of transformation, and anyone looking for that inspiration or that transformation should listen to this podcast, should listen to your story, should go and see some of the work you've done, because it's incredible. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now and who is Harry now?
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at, there are things that happen for us, which are quite traumatic, and you're like, you wished it didn't. And then there are things that you get good at, and you just suddenly like, man, I didn't realize I was good at that, right? And speaking was that. So I never thought of myself as a speaker back then. I was a trainer. I was a facilitator. And then all of a sudden you got these speakers around me. And I wanted to become a speaker because I was good at it. So suddenly I'm hanging around with the top speakers around the world and big stages. And I'm like, I would have done it different. And they're asking me. And I started giving a few strategies. And after a while, I created my whole system about how to really be world-class speaker, right? So I'm still doing the speaking, still on the speaking circuit. And I focus on helping people that can make an influence now. So founders, CEOs who have an element of like, I want to do social change. So create a legacy rather than just a business, right? So I'm still helping them. I do that. But I merge it with all the humanitarian work I do. And the biggest project that I'm focused on, that's why people should not be surprised. A kid who experienced domestic violence is very active in the youth leadership world. Not because the kids who've got problems. I never had a problem. So I don't want to say to the kids, you've got problems. You're a kid, let's do leadership. We'll show you how to become a great service leader, self-leadership, all the tools. So I'm still running leadership programs for kids. I'm still developing programs for women because I wanted to now, as an adult, give what I wanted as a kid. And I want women to have what my mum never had. And for those viewers that are probably sitting there going, how's his mum? My mum's still beautiful. She's still alive. She's still sharing magical stories with me. But the biggest humanitarian project I've got right now is what I call like an evolvement of all the youth leadership summits we have is what I call a youth speaker challenge. It's taken the two gifts that I've been given in terms of, leadership training and public speaking. So now we take one teenager from 100 different countries, like 20 from Africa, 20 from Asia, all 20 from the 5 major continents. And I personally mentor them to go through the full training that we have at the World Class Speakers Academy. And we train them to create their own signature presentation that they then deliver to a minimum of 1,000 kids in their nation. And they're like delivering it to tens of thousands. But the whole program is about these 100 teens have been given the gift of being able to speak, create impact. And it's a 10-year program. So Amit, 1,000 teens are speaking to at least 1,000 other young people. That's millions. But the real reason I'm doing it is what I said to you earlier from a spiritual thing. These 1,000 teens are not just becoming great speakers. They're becoming what I call socially conscious human beings. And our world needs that right now. So that's my biggest gift at the moment. And tomorrow's not promised for any of us. So there's a whole team that are involved to put that on. But the Youth Speaker Challenge is a challenge. Let's put it that way. But it's like we like to take on challenges. And that's the one I'm on at the moment.
Harry, this has been such a deep, insightful conversation. I think there's so much more I could talk to you about. I think we could do like a 5-hour podcast or a 5-part series with you, really, because I learned so much when I spoke to you that time a couple of months ago. I've learned so much in this session. I'm sure our viewers and listeners learned so much. What's the lasting message you'd leave to our listeners then? What would you say? What's something I'd leave a listener?
You know what it is? I always believe the greatest things that happen to us in our life are usually the things that we don't plan. So we live in a world now where people are taught to hustle and fix things. And I would love all your viewers to be able to do two things. One is anything that you want to put your mind to, go against what others may be suggesting about go all in. I wouldn't go all in. I'd be like 60-40. I'd spend my time, energy, money following through the plan, and then I'd leave 40% of something far bigger than you coming in, whether you call it synchronicity, whether you call it God, whether you call it universe, whatever you want to call it. I would say allow room for something that's far bigger than you, where you can just allow magic to happen. That would be the biggest thing. But when people ask me what's my mission, and that's what I would share with other people, if my life is to other people like an absolute dream, it's simply because if I could put it down to two things, it's what I said, doing good, doing great. And I would love people to realize if you can do good things for others authentically and consistently, you'll not just be doing good, you'll also be doing great. Because that's when the world and the universe will come back and repay you.
Authentically and consistently. I think that is a really key message there. I love that. Yeah. So thank you, Harry. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for having this conversation. In every interview, what we do is we ask the guest to ask a question to our next guest without knowing who they are. Yeah. So our last guest had a question for you. They had no idea who you were.
Okay.
And their question was, if you had power for one day, they didn't really quantify what it was. They said, if you had power for one day, what is that one thing you'd do in that one day?
I would get together all of the world leaders who have the power of making decisions financially and legislatively. I'd bring them all together and I'd bang their heads together first, and then I would raise their level of consciousness so they don't have to do anything. They would just, their energy would change the world.
It's powerful. And without knowing who our next guest is, what's the one question that you'd like to ask?
What was it that you desired the most as a child that you didn't get, that you could now give as an adult?
Wow. Brilliant question. Thank you so much. Lastly, a few months ago, wrote a book, Harry. It's called Born Different. It was my experiences that I had when I was in school of feeling isolated, lonely, being bullied, and how I overcame that. So in each episode, I give a signed copy to a guest as a thank you. So this is for you and your family and your children. Thank you so much.
I came all the way to the Midlands just for this. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
Thank you.